Hello and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast. I am your host, Fabrice, and joining me here in the Murrieta studios is Dr. David Burns. Hi, David.
Hi, Fabrice.
Dr. David Burns has been a pioneer in the development of cognitive therapy, and he is the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 20 languages. He is an emeritus adjunct clinical professor of psychiatry at the Stanford University School of Medicine. Welcome to episode
58.
58.
Here at Murrieta Studios.
At Murrieta Studios, yes.
Hello, Fabrice.
Hi, David. All right, that was an interesting start. Today, one thing that we want to bring up today is Marilyn's session has gotten a lot of comments and feedbacks, and we wanted to present some of the praise for Marilyn because she really deserves it, and she's been quite brave to come on. Before we read this, I'd like to announce that maybe we'll publish it after this episode, but we have a tune-up session with Marilyn because she came back after some metastasis that had occurred in her diagnosis, right?
In her ribs, yes, painful metastasis.
And so she came back and she did another session with you and Matt, and we're going to publish this session its entirety in one episode. And this is going to be about 2 hours long. And for that reason, we're going to make this like what some people call an in-between episode. Yeah. It will be 58 and a half. And for those of you who don't have 2 hours at one sitting to listen to this, you can skip it and get next week's episode. But it will be distributed right in between.
Yeah, and that's going to be another magical episode, and I just didn't want it published on Mondays on our normal day because you're used to something, 30 minutes, 45 minutes.
Yeah, a lot of people listen to this on their commute
And I thought it was unfair to ask you to have a 2-hour program when you're expecting a 30-minute program. But I want to just read some of these, and Fabrice will read some.
Actually,
as well.
Why don't I start? This is a rather long one here.
Yeah, okay.
So Jennifer wrote to us and she said, thank you to you and Marilyn and Matt and Fabrice. The podcast with Marilyn was powerful. Just finished the second part and had to write. I live in New Orleans and I'm unable to attend all the wonderful Tuesday nights we hear about. So to have this podcast is pretty significant and wonderful. I immediately felt connected to Marilyn during the first episode, feeling her emotions right along with her, like I was able to experience what it may be like to have this diagnosis. And I felt sad when it was over and could hardly wait to hear the next week, so I had to be with that discomfort. Among other profound ways she helped through sharing her experience, she is teaching us the great lesson of impermanence as the Buddha taught. Such a valuable teaching she gives by sharing her experience. And this week was amazing. I was trying to pay close attention to the brilliant work of you and Matt. He is just so good. It was such a great learning experience. I felt like I was realizing and discovering right along with Marilyn. My heart is filled with love and pure compassion and deep appreciation for the three of you for sharing this with us. I want each of you to know what a tremendously beneficial learning experience this was for listeners, and that I will undoubtedly use this in my work, mainly with folks from LGBTQ/POC and other marginalized communities, often dealing with addiction. I am hopeful it will directly impact my ability and skills in helping others. Ripples, ripples. So, she says if you can pass on my thanks to Marilyn, Matt, and Fabrice. Thanks, Jennifer.
What a beautiful statement from Jennifer. And I just had wanted us to read these, and I just grabbed these miscellaneously before you dropped by, Fabrice. I didn't systematically skim. I just found these. There are many others. This one was from Rob. Rob is one of my favorite people in the world. He's kind of a fan, but he attended my Boston workshop, although it was for professionals. He's a private individual, and he actually
he's a groupie, right?
Yeah, kind of like, and and he did the live demo with me in Boston, and he just really lit the place up. It was fantastic, and he sends often after our podcast the most beautiful comments that touched me. And here was one of his on Marilyn Part 3, the audio podcast. Wow, so much gold in this podcast. I don't know where to start. David's comment about the 4 life partners in the room was mind-blowing. I don't even know what that meant. What was my comment about the 4?
No, I'm not sure either, but...
partner. Oh, well. I also...
We'll have to listen to that again.
Yeah, like the comment David made about Marilyn teaching spirituality to others. The scales fell from my eyes on that one. In parenthesis, I think that's a St. Paul on the road to Damascus reference. In parenthesis, I'm going to light a candle for Marilyn's intentions at St. Anthony's today. I still have 20 minutes of podcast to go, exclamation point. So what another beautiful...
So he had to stop and write before finishing the podcast.
Yeah, and here Marilyn is this is a very spiritual guy, an expert on spirituality, and here he's saying, I'm learning about spirituality from Marilyn. And what is Marilyn saying? She's saying, I've lost my belief in God.
Yeah.
I'm not spiritual enough. It's another one of those paradoxes.
Yeah.
But Rob makes intellectually brilliant comments, but you speak from the heart, Rob, and boy, it means a lot to me.
Yeah, he's talking to you, Rob.
Yeah, all right. And here's another one from Tim, someone named Tim. I won't give his last name, but I just want to take a moment to thank you, Matt, Fabrice, and Marilyn for the live sessions podcast. These episodes are truly gifts of grace. The love, compassion, and beautiful therapy that is shared is truly an inspiration. I'm truly humbled to be able to listen to them. What just an amazing, kind thing to say. Thank you for that, Tim, and I'm sure Marilyn will appreciate it too. And then finally, here's one from, I don't know who this, Phil, from Phil, yeah. What great work you folks are doing. These podcasts are the highlights of my week, and I'm learning a ton. Thank you, Marilyn, for sharing your journey.
Yeah, this really points to the incredible gift that someone like Marilyn, who's willing to do really deep personal work, is bringing to the community of people who are listening to this. I'm just amazed.
Yeah, that's right. And we're hoping to do more. We're working on more live work broadcasts. Something magical happens in the live work. It's not only the magic of seeing someone's symptoms entirely disappear in a single, say, 2-hour therapy session, which some people would think is impossible, but also the meanings that come with it. There's always a lot of deep meaning when someone changes their life in such a profound way. And I'm trying to think about the ethics of it, but the person who we did at the summer intensive in Burlingame, a beautiful young woman, I think I mentioned on a previous podcast, her recovery was so fast and fantastic that a lot of people thought it was fake. It was impossible for something like that to happen. It took about a little over an hour, and she just went from never having had a happy minute in my life to just bubbling with euphoria. Yeah. It was just incredible. Well, I happened to get a follow-up video from her talking about the experience.
Oh, a video?
Yes, and about a half an hour one. Lisa Kelly took it. She happened to be visiting in her hometown and looked her up, and she's still on this bubbly high.
Amazing.
And I thought I might publish it also on the website so people can, seeing is believing. The video of the actual live work didn't come out. It was too dark in the room. But we have this excellent follow-up.
Well, do you have the audio for the work?
Well, that didn't come out either.
Oh, okay. Well, that's too bad.
Screwed up. It was really too bad. But
Okay.
But yeah, and then there was something else I was going to say, but I can't remember. Oh yeah, and also then on the hike this week, magic happens on the hikes as well. We'll often see miraculous, what appears like miraculous healing with the people who come on the hikes, often with years of failed treatment for depression or anxiety, and then see complete transformation. And we happen to have audio going on the hike this Sunday. I don't know if it'll be good enough to publish as a podcast.
Yeah, let's find out.
But it was, not only did this person completely, the symptoms completely eliminate, but he actually went into enlightenment, like what you'd call Buddhist enlightenment or spiritual, full-blown enlightenment.
Yeah.
And we actually captured it on audio. You can see him going from kind of a state of confusion and disbelief. And we were talking about this theme I'm writing about for my new book, Feeling Great. Do we have a self? Can the self be judged? Is question number one. And question number two is, do we even have a self or need a self?
Yeah.
And he couldn't see at first that the idea that we have a self is just an illusion, just a trap. But he suddenly grasped it. You can see what led him to grasp this, and just the joy that came flooding into his heart from that insight. So we'll see if the audio is good enough. But we're trying to get as much of this live stuff on audio and maybe eventually on video too, because I think what's happening is just incredible. Well, we've got some good questions from listeners.
Today is an Ask David episode, and we have a couple of things here. First one here is somebody says, I'm a huge fan of your podcast and books, and thank you. And this is from Johnny. He says, I wondered what your thoughts on ThirdWave CBT, in parentheses, mindfulness, compassion, meditation, etc., was. As from what I can tell, you don't seem to emphasize these in your tools. Rather, it seems to be that the cognitive reappraisal methods. I would love to know what you think of mindfulness compared to reappraisal. Also, what your thoughts are on Paul Gilbert's compassion-focused therapy and compassionate reappraisal, etc. Thanks in advance.
Well, I have to preface my words by saying two things. First of all, my point of view isn't always correct, so take what I say with a grain of salt. I have strong beliefs about things, and sometimes yeah, sometimes I've got good ideas that turn out to be true, and often I'm wrong. So take what I say with a grain of salt and do your own thinking. Secondly, I tend to be a bit of a cynic about certain things. So if I'm throwing cold water on your parade, I apologize ahead of time. But I see these things, ThirdWave CBT, Mindfulness-Based CBT, as personally uninteresting. To me, they're nonspecific types of treatments, and I'm convinced that they're no more effective than placebo. Now, people point to research and say, oh, well, aerobic exercise is as good as antidepressants or mindfulness.
Yeah, you hear that quite a bit.
Yeah,
is as good exercise, this is, as good as...
Yeah, and exercise is another non-specific treatment. But the thing is that antidepressants themselves, now the evidence is pretty strong. They are no better than placebo. So when you say something's as good as antidepressant, you're really saying it has a placebo effect and not much more. Now, if people like meditation or mindfulness, I say go for it. Or if you like, playing basketball, go for it. If you like prayer, go for it. But that's not treatment for any illness. When I work with people,
by the way, I'll point out that you did an episode on called "The Truth on Antidepressants."
Oh yeah,
episode 20.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
We're beginning to have kind of like a little library of those topics. So I want to point people back to it.
So. And in a previous podcast, I gave an example of a specific technique, but essentially when I work with someone, I like to sit down with them for 2 hours and complete the treatment. So I don't need them to be meditating for 5 or 10 or 15 years to get some kind of effect. If they want to do work after the session, I would rather them work on the techniques that they learned in the session, which are proven to rapidly make all their symptoms disappear. So when they get upset, I would say, move to the techniques I'm training you in, like externalization of voices, acceptance paradox, daily mood log, identify the distortions, paradoxical double standard. The things that are really effective for depression and anxiety, or exposure for fears, the hidden emotion technique. And if you want to do exercise, great. I exercise. I hate it, but I do it for my health. And, I don't get any mood elevation from it. I never have, but it's a good thing to exercise and run and keep your heart and lungs in good condition. And if you want to do those things, that's wonderful. And if you have some enlightenment experiences from them, that's even cooler. But I don't think that's a useful treatment for depression or anxiety or anything. And in saying that, I know I'm going against the wave of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people who will throw tomatoes at me and who are just so excited about mindfulness-based CBT or ThirdWave CBT. I'm not in favor of any school of therapy, to be honest with you. And TEAM is not a new school of therapy. It's a structure, a database, science-based structure for psychotherapy.
But so let me push you on this a little bit.
You can push me. I'm easily pushable.
No, I think that you push back quite a bit. But nonetheless, this is something that people are probably asking themselves. Let's take mindfulness, for example. Doesn't matter. Maybe mindfulness is a non-specific method, and I'm sure some people may argue this, but let's, for the sake of argument, say that it's a non-specific method.
And let me just say what non-specific means.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
When someone is depressed, I'm a strong advocate of cognitive theory as well as cognitive therapy. Has a lot of useful techniques, but they'll have specific negative thoughts. Like, I'm a loser, you see, or when I get in front of that audience, my mind will go blank. Then people will laugh at me, and then they'll look down on me, and that will prove I'm an inferior human being, and then my career will be destroyed. Yeah. Or I'm a hopeless case, and I will never recover from depression, or I'm a bad person because I made this or that mistake, or I'm inferior because I'm not smart enough, because I've never accomplished anything. I'm just an average human being. And those are the thoughts that have to be crushed for the person to recover. And the moment they stop believing those thoughts, at that very instant, they'll recover. Within seconds, the depression will disappear. But someone could have the thought, I'm a worthless human being, and meditate for decades, or exercise for decades. They could become the world champion marathon runner, but they would still have that thought, I'm a worthless human being, or I'm should be better than I am, or whatever the thing is that's creating the depression. So
the question I was going to ask you is, people have found that mindfulness is helpful for this or that, but since it's non-specific, you're saying that a non-specific method does not fit within the TEAM models. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right.
So it's not all methods.
You don't just throw mud at the wall.
Right. So it's not all methods that belong in there, only specific ones.
I would say so, yes.
And they have to target a specific thought or even behavior or mood, right?
Yeah, yes, that's right. If it's a habit, you'd have to be targeting motivations.
Right.
If it's a relationship problem, you'd have to target motivations and communication techniques and cognitions as well. See, you could meditate for 10,000 years and you would never learn the 5 secrets of effective communication. You would not learn how to deal with the relationship conflict. Yeah. And learning that takes a lot of practice.
Right.
It's like saying, could I learn to dance through meditation? And the answer is no.
Correct. Yeah. So I think that's something important for our listeners to grasp, is that even though this is tools, not schools of therapy, it's not just any tool.
That's right.
It's a kind of tool, and we'll agree that they don't have to be cognitive tools, but they have to be specific.
Yeah. Like another question would be, should you meditate to minimize the chance of getting the flu for flu season? Well, you could have a lot of people meditate, and most of them wouldn't get the flu. And then they'd say, oh, yeah, meditation helped me not get the flu. But most people don't get the flu anyway. If you don't want to get the flu, get a flu shot. Don't meditate, for the flu.
On the other hand, you could say, well, meditation has been proven to improve the immune system, and so you're less likely to get the flu, but you're less likely to get anything else.
Yes, and that would be fabulous if it weren't for the fact that those studies are, as the Buddha so often said, worthless or
Uh-oh. We're gonna have
from a scientific
we're going to have
point
to
of view.
bleep this.
I don't think those studies are impressive or well done.
Okay. So anyhow, I hope this answers the question. So really it's about specific versus non-specific.
Yeah, and that's just my point of view. That's how I've worked, and that's how I've evolved this super high-speed treatment approach that I'm thrilled with. And if other people want to do that stuff, I say more power to you. That's great.
And again, this is I see this as a dialogue with our listeners, and we invite any feedback if they have some things to say about this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, moving on to the next question, we have something here from
this is a really,
AA, whoever AA is.
This is a good question.
Okay, I'm surprised to hear that the cognitive flooding was tried after cognitive restructuring. Usually exposure is the first line of treatment for OCD. This is on episode 45. Can you explain why you tried other tools first?
Well, that was a great question. And I had to really think back and examine my own thinking on that. And I have both a yin and a yang answer to that. The pro answer is you're absolutely right. And if I had tried the downward arrow technique, this was the woman who was afraid her baby would be switched at the hospital.
Yeah.
And it turned out she kept thinking she had the wrong baby, and then she had the fear that someone else would have her baby, and then she had these horrible fantasies of people torturing her baby to death in Mexico in a cabin. And
yeah.
I reluctantly had her fantasize these terrible fears.
Yeah.
And after about 3 or 4 hours of horrifically upsetting cognitive flooding, finally the fears dissipated and went to zero, and she was cured at that point. And yes, this was early in my career when I was learning cognitive therapy and behavior therapy, and I may not have at that time appreciated quite as much the importance of exposure as an early treatment for any form of anxiety, and especially OCD. And so I have to say you've got a good point there. If I had thought of that initially, might have been able to get a complete recovery in 3 or 4 sessions instead of like 30 sessions or whatever it eventually required. On the other side, I have to disagree with you a little that OCD, exposure and response prevention, are not a treatment for OCD or for anything in the world, for that matter. Those are only treatment tools and treatment methods. And while exposure and response prevention must be included on your recovery circle, if you're working with someone with OCD and you do a daily mood log and you take a thought and you put it in the middle of a recovery circle, like if I don't wash my hands, my children will die of cancer, or whatever the thought is that's associated with the OCD, that I use 4 models in treating all anxiety disorders: the cognitive model, the exposure model, the motivational model, and the hidden emotion model.
Right.
And when I've worked with OCD patients, I would say most of the time I've had a complete elimination of symptoms by combining those 4 models. And if you just treat OCD patients with exposure and response prevention, your success rate will be especially low for 2 reasons. The first reason is many patients will fight you and be unwilling to do it because you haven't addressed their resistance. And number two...
Well, of course, you have to do agenda setting, yes.
Absolutely. And that's, if you're saying I'm going to treat OCD with exposure and response prevention, you're ignoring testing, empathy, agenda setting. Absolutely. But also, often the hidden emotion model is huge with OCD patients. And you can get, I've had patients where there was some improvement with exposure, but not a complete elimination of symptoms. And then I came in with the hidden emotion model, and bingo, the symptoms went to zero, entirely disappeared. In fact, we had a podcast on that as well.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a great question, and I really like it when readers or listeners, I should say, are thinking on that deeper level and bringing up cool questions like that.
And you're referring to the series we did called Scared Stiff.
Yeah.
That was episodes 22 through 28.
Yeah.
So people can go back to that.
So maybe is that enough for... What's our timing today?
We're well into our time, so I think we'll keep that as a shorter episode. Yeah. People will probably feel relieved that we're not going on for an hour this time.
On and on, thinking we're so important. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you, Fabrice. And again, thank you, Marilyn, for the gifts that you have brought us, which are very, very touching. You're really reaching many people. You've become a great teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and one thing I wanted to mention, it's been a while since I talked about it, but this podcast gets distributed more widely if you put a review on iTunes. So for those of you who subscribe on iTunes, please log into iTunes and leave a review so that more people get informed about it. All right, we'll see you next week.
Okay, thank you, Fabrice.
Bye-bye. This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes for this podcast under the blog page, and where you can leave your comments and questions. The website has an abundance of resources for therapists as well as non-therapists, including books, workshops, a list of online training groups around the world, and much more. Theme music is Gypsy Jazz in Paris, 1935, composed and performed by Brett Van Donsel. I am your host, Fabrice Nye, and I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.